A lot to pray about, even as we continue to pray about the Middle East and what's happening in Israel. Well, Israeli forces continue the war to root out Hamas terrorists responsible for the murderous October 7th attacks. Now, Israeli leaders must also contend with United Nations officials, including the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who referred to Israel's military effort as the, quote, collective punishment of the Palestinian people, end quote. UN officials clearly envision a role for themselves as mediators once the war ends. But how can Israel trust their decisions? Joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Keith Self. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Veterans Affairs Committee. He represents the 3rd Congressional District of Texas. Congressman Self, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony. Great to be here.
So, Congressman, I mean, I would think it would be evident to any thinking person that what's happening in Gaza right now is Hamas is hiding behind women and children. But yet you have, like, the Secretary General basically being a mouthpiece for Hamas, accusing Israel of attacking and killing women and children.
Well, that shouldn't surprise us at all. He is a member of the Portuguese Socialist Party. Anti-Semitism is around the world. That's why the Human Rights Council of the UN, we see seats that have Afghanistan, Iraq, and Venezuela on it, and yet Israel is not on the Human Rights Council. This is the UN policy and has been for a while. They routinely censure Israel. In fact, the United States uses our veto authority occasionally to protect Israel from even worse punishment.
We're seeing this starting to influence the United States government, of course, with the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protests that are taking place on college campuses, on the streets, and at the White House. We see this hesitation from the Biden administration to stand resolutely with our ally. I mean, we've got to send a clear message. If they're not able to eliminate this threat, how can Israel remain safe?
Well, Israel has dealt with this since 1948, and there are Iranian sympathizers in the Biden administration. We know them by name, and that's why we're seeing that hesitancy, as you call it. They are, frankly, can be Iranian sympathizers. And talking about the universities, the protests, our universities have been hotbeds of anti-Americanism, incubators for Marxism for years now. So this is no surprise to see it. But frankly, I'm actually seeing the universities get such pushback that they're actually having to moderate their anti-American stance, pro-Palestinian stance.
So when this is over, and hopefully sooner rather than later in Israel, in Gaza, does the UN have a role here? I mean, how can we trust the UN in mediating a peace that is also taking into account the security that Israel is looking for?
We can't trust the UN to do this because, as I've already laid out, they are virulently anti-Israel, and we cannot trust them to do it. The UN builds forces out of countries that want to be paid for their forces that go in. We've not had very good experience with some of the nations that send troops to do these peacekeeping operations. They don't have a very good record. I think the United States would be a better player in this because the UN cannot be trusted, Tony. I wouldn't trust them to do this because of their history with anti-Israel actions.
So Congressman Self, when you look at what's happening here, and you've got a long history in the United States military and the Army, and now sitting on the Foreign Affairs Committee, are you concerned at this getting out of control in the Middle East with Iran and, with China standing by watching? Do they make a move on Taiwan? Are we at a very, very critical point?
Well, we see the evil axis at work here, China, Russia, and Iran. We now have two small wars distracting the United States. And what we need to do is keep our bubble of intelligence around Israel so that we can keep Iran at bay and Iranian surrogates at bay. That's what we need to be doing to keep the fight in Israel proper and in Gaza so that Hezbollah, for instance, doesn't get more involved. The Houthis in Yemen don't get more involved. So that should be our role today, is to kind of keep a bubble around the war as it is right now.
Well, it's also just a reminder we need to be praying. The world is very volatile right now. This is where leadership is really, really important. We need our leadership to make the right decisions, and we need to be praying they do so. Congressman Keith Self, thanks so much for joining us today. Always great to see you on Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for the opportunity.